So friends, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Ronnate. I'm gonna move, I like to keep myself on gallery mode most of the service so I can see all of your faces, but now I want to be able to see Ronnate. It's good to see you. We've been on the phone a lot, but it's great to see your face. How are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you for the warm welcome.
Absolutely. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a formal introduction to Ronnate, but before I do that, I want to say that Ronnate and I developed a friendship and hopefully a mutual respect. I certainly had a great deal of respect for Ronnate. When working with American Jewish World Service, I had the opportunity to be one of their social justice fellows. And I traveled to the Dominican Republic. And in preparation before leaving, and then while we were in the Dominican Republic, and many times since, often advocating for human and civil rights for people around the world, as well as kind of financial and other kinds of support, Ronnate was guiding us as the senior foreign policy advisor for American Jewish World Service. And I really appreciated both the level of preparation and the ways that we were able to work together. And so when we found another opportunity to join forces, we decided to do so. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Ronnate and introduce her to all of you. Currently, she is the Senior Director Strategy and Advocacy. She is the Director of Strategy and Advocacy for Bridges Faith Initiative, which is a national faith-based advocacy organization. She has 10 years experience in the U.S. federal advocacy and has also worked in humanitarian, human rights, and foreign policy advocacy in Sri Lanka, South Sudan, and Burma. She received her master's in law and diplomacy from the Fletcher School, Tufts University, Massachusetts, and a master's in human rights and humanitarian law from the University of Essex in the United Kingdom. Currently, she lives in the Washington, D.C. area with her husband. And so I told her that I was going to ask her a quintessential Jewish question just to get us started, which I wanted to know if she had a favorite food and particularly a food from her home.
Thanks, Josh. And yes, hi, Jackie. Yay, Jumbos. That is the Tufts Fletcher School. For those of you who don't know, to answer your question, Josh. So my favorite food from home, especially, is something called pittu. So it is flour. So it could be, it's usually rice flour, but you could also do it with wheat flour and water and salt. You just mix it up, and there's a special. It doesn't have to be done this way, but this is the way it's usually done. You know, once you've moved to America, you just find new ways to do things. But it's usually put in this pan like a funnel, and it's steamed. So it comes out like a funnel. And so you have this flour and a mix as well as coconut, and you put it in this funnel-like pan, and you steam it. And so it's a savory that you would eat like rice, and but it's called pittu. And I like that to eat it with tongue curry. That's my favorite food.
Awesome. So now we'll get to the serious matters, but you know, there's always a great way of bonding over food. So really, you know, again, I want to welcome you. I'm so glad that you're here. And the reason why I invited you to speak on this particular Shabbat is because, as you've heard and as I've mentioned to our community, is that the portion that Jews read from the Torah this week speaks about how we might welcome what often is translated as the stranger, but in Hebrew can also be legitimately and often is understood as the immigrant. So last week, as I said, we read about the 10 Commandments, and this week we are really given the basic building blocks to create a new society. And this is important because the Israelites, according to the Torah, arrived in Mitzrayim, which often gets translated as Egypt, but I feel like we conjure modern day Egypt, and really what I think we're referring to are the narrow places that all immigrants often flee when they feel the need to flee home. As Warsan Shire has written in her poetry very powerfully, is that no one willfully chooses to leave home. Often it is because there is something narrow that they're escaping. And so they're already refugees from the land of Canaan when they settled in the narrow place. And they did so because they left a famine. Treated well at first, they were never granted full and equal citizenship. And so eventually they became seen as a threat, once welcomed, now a threat, and they are increasingly oppressed as we read their story. What follows is the escape from their enslavement and their journey to the promised land. So among the laws that they're given in this week's Torah portion, as I've said, is do not oppress the stranger, for you know the soul of the stranger, for you were immigrants in the land of the narrow place. And of note that this is repeated in the same reading twice, so we have it 2 times in this reading, and in the Hebrew Bible altogether 36 times. So I'm wondering how this text relates to why you have been a lifelong immigration advocate.
Thanks, Josh. I think this text sort of relates to me and why I have been such a lifelong advocate. I would say, first of all, it was because I felt a stranger in my own land because of the oppression and inequality there. And then, growing up and fighting against that, and it was because of that oppression and inequality, then I was forced to flee. And now, having received asylum and become a citizen in the United States, I see the same. I see inequality and oppression in the system here, especially in the immigration system. And therefore, I feel that I need to. It is both my duty and also the work that I feel that I have been set out to do to advocate and to add a little more context to that and tell a personal story. So I am from Sri Lanka, as you know, or you might have known. Sri Lanka has had ethnic strife for as long as I have been born. And even on the day that I was supposed to, and it's ethnic strife between main communities, a Sinhalese and a Tamil. And Tamils, I am from the Tamil community. And even on the day that I was supposed to be born, so on my mother's due date, there were government-sponsored riots, and our house was going to be attacked. But then my pregnant mother, obviously, she stood in front of the house. My father had gone to support neighbors and others, and they didn't attack our house. Needless to say, I was not born on that day. I was born later because I clearly didn't want to come out to this type of work. But then when I was 4 years old, there was again riots, and this time we did have to flee our house. And since then, there was we were the lucky ones. We were able to return to our home, but there were a lot of internally displaced camps in the country, and then there was a military war between both the government and the rebel group, and that continued and until 2009. And that was that was not the only thing. There was obviously a lot of oppression, a lot of human rights violations going on in different fronts. And then in 2008, 2009, 2009. There was mass atrocities where the United Nations then said there was, United Nations estimate that more than 40,000 civilians were killed in the space of 3 months. That rape was used as a weapon of war. It was just terrible. At that time, I was in the country. I was working for a humanitarian organization, and my job was also to, try to make sure that the staff we had, the staff there was safe as well. My husband is a journalist, and he was also writing against the war. And at that time, he was then arrested. He was tortured, and he was given a 20-year sentence just for writing, which the government said was a terrorist act. And then, because I was advocating for his freedom, I was also under attack. The forces were trying to kidnap me. There was I had to keep moving around. And then I decided to flee the country with, and the fleeing it was not like the way a lot of people come to the southern border. I did come on a plane, so that was much more helpful, I think, in the latter part of going through the immigration system, and I can talk about that later. But that's how 11 years ago, almost 11 years ago, I came to the United States, knowing that, that I might not see my country again, or the country that I had left, and I hope to adopt this country. So that was something. So that is something that I have experienced.
So appreciate your willingness to share this challenging part of your story. And to me, what feels incredibly redemptive is that you've taken that experience and you've dedicated your life to advocating for others in different situations in this immigration system, and understanding the ways that the United States both makes it difficult for countries just by the actions that they create in the world and support some political instability, as well as the system itself. And so I was wondering, on the other side of coming to the United States, what would you like more people to know about the immigrant experience and the asylee experience to understand the importance of the work that you do now?
I think one of the most important things to understand is that within the system, and I think first of all, there should be changes within the system, and then also just within communities. So one of the things that really made it easy for me was that I had, for me to go through the asylum system, was that I had a lawyer. I was a pro bono lawyer, and that really made things easier. The second thing I would say was that I think right now there is, especially now, one looks at immigrants quite differently, or there is a lot of information that paints immigrants simply not as people, as undocumented, and undocumented equals illegal equals people who are prone to crime. And this clearly, once one starts putting labels on people, one cannot see them as people. And this is something I work definitely to try and take those images away, because because I think it's really important to see that these are people, and that simply, the fact that somebody doesn't have documentation. And let me give you an example from my own work, or from my own experience. The immigration system, even at that time, was difficult. It is even more difficult now. But even when I came 11 years ago, it was extremely difficult. And even though I could, and I still can, read English and work in an English system, it was still difficult and complicated. I obviously came on a visa, and when I was then adjusting my status, by the time my visa expired and my adjustment of status came through, there was a gap. At which point, technically, I was undocumented. I didn't do anything illegal, right? I had also put in, because of I had a lawyer, and the lawyer came through a friend. It was not like I was thinking about it. I was just happened to be lucky to be blessed to be able to have such a lawyer and a pro bono lawyer. So my lawyer had put in the papers, but since my visa had expired, if my lawyer had not told me that it was okay, that your other, I've already put in the papers, it's just a delay in the government getting you the stuff. It's fine. You can continue your life. I was going to school at the time. I would have been afraid. And even if my papers had come after that, I would have been like, oh my gosh, no, I missed this time. So now I shouldn't go through the next steps. Right. And this is why a lot of people do not get their paperwork in time and become undocumented. It is not that all of them and everybody is doing something illegal. So I think the myth of what and who an immigrant is, I think is really important right now to understand that and to always see the person. And then I would say the third thing that is most important in the whole immigration, working on immigration, is empowerment of immigrants themselves, but mainly of immigrants themselves. I can say that, Rabbi Josh and I have had many conversations, and I have not felt empowered enough to tell my story publicly, simply because, I have been told since I've been here, despite, my abilities, oh, you are an immigrant, so you can't talk about immigration. You'll be too biased. Or you as an immigrant, what do you know? You don't know our systems. I have learned the systems, clearly. I didn't know it when I came. But that kind of empowerment, I think, is necessary where, and it is because I have to credit Rabbi Josh a lot for supporting me in this and understanding that showing me that, yes, I can do many things. And that kind of empowerment where then we can support the system and support it in a way that where the person is centered is, I think, important. So I would say that's, going forward, that's things that we need to think about.
No, I so appreciate that. And it kind of leads right into the next question that I have, which, I think that part of why I was interested in the proposal to support you in starting your own organization, the Bridge Faith Initiative, is because it was important for me to see somebody like yourself actually speaking, for immigrants to be speaking for themselves and to be advocating for themselves, and to have somebody who in a very real way knows that heart of the experience. It's not just baked into a faith tradition, or I know the experience from my grandparents and my great-grandparents, but and so it feels incredibly important. But I wonder, for you, what is your vision and what do you hope to accomplish by founding this new organization?
So my vision in founding this new organization was to, as the name says, to build bridges, but first on issues, because, from where I see it as, and my own experience, is that I think we need to have a holistic approach in trying to sort of empower people and ensure human rights and democracy. It's just like not just the immigration problem, or if not just an immigration problem, if that is the problem, or a refugee problem, or the reason why there are refugees and asylees, etc., for the most part, is because of war, that has been my experience. There is other reasons why they are, but mainly war, persecution, etc. So I want to be the bridge for people to try to see. I hope that this organization would be in a position where it would be working on these issues in a holistic way. So that is why Bridges Faith Initiative is working on sort of three big buckets. One is civilian security. This is not. This has parts of national security, but it mostly keeps the civilian in context. So this talks about, of trying to have systems where there is no torture, where there is more civil liberties, and advocating for policies that promote that. The second bucket that we at Bridges work on is ending mass atrocities. The reason when there's more and more torture, less and less civil liberties, it goes on to mass atrocities. And since my experience has been in Sri Lanka and Burma, we are focusing on that, but we are also focusing on the larger policies that we hope would end mass atrocities. And we are obviously focused a lot on the US government, not just because that's where we are, but the US does have a lot of influence. It is the biggest influence, in my opinion, on all of these things around the world. And so if we have the policies here, and some of the policies we do have, like there's the Elie Wiesel Act, which is to prevent mass atrocities, but it's the implementation that we need to push through. And then of course it is the US immigration. So those are the three buckets. First is civilian security, ending mass atrocities, and changing the immigration system, a just and humane US immigration system. So I would say that is what we're working on. That is my vision, to be a bridge on that. And I have two others actually. One of the things that, being here in the US, being in DC, and then, having the pleasure of meeting Josh from Atlanta and people from other different states, etc. I have always, at least 10 years ago, I was wondering, like, why do people just hate DC so much? It's always like, oh, this DC is just the worst. Being a person who lives in DC, I love it. But it's actually, what I've come to realize is, what people dislike about DC is actually the people who are not from DC, i.e. Congress. We have no representation there. But the bigger thing is that I think there's quite a gap between what, we in DC see how the government works, and, people who don't live in DC, like in Atlanta, for example. You don't see how the government works up close, and then that also leads to why the government is important or not important in people's lives, and how misinformation can spread. So I'm hoping that this organization would be the bridge between the DC and not DC, in terms of culture and information. And then the third part would be, I'm hoping this organization would be the bridge between communities, and it could be both communities within this country. One is, for example, if you take the immigration community, the immigrant community, people see immigrants mainly as Hispanic, newcomers, etc. And even in places like Atlanta, you would see that there's a tension, not just between, the native people of Atlanta and the newcomers who might be the immigrants. It's even for people who, it's even like you can slice and dice how people are different in communities and go deeper. For example, immigrants and the Black community, there's a tension there because, if you go and look at the meat packer industry, for example, more Black community members have been pushed out because, immigrants work for less and they come. So then you have that where this community is then divided when actually it's a systematic issue that, people are just being paid very low wages for lower and lower jobs. So I hope to be I hope this organization can be a bridge builder with communities, communities of color, communities of different ethnicities, communities of newcomer and native, as well as faith communities. So those are what I hope would be the three bridges.
So I'm going to ask us a final question, and I just want to say that what was really compelling about when we first talked is when you talked about that holistic approach and that recognizing that actually there's a domestic policy side and a foreign policy side, that often organizations are only working on one side of it rather than holding both of them together. So, I know that we have a new administration, and already many things have happened. And so I'm curious about this new administration. What is making you hopeful? And where do you think that we will be needing to, or where do we right now need to advocate to create a more just immigration system?
So clearly, I think what is making it more hopeful is the general tone, let me say, of the administration, where immigration and immigrants are not a dirty word, are not criminal. And I think that makes a big difference. I think, the day one or first week, first 3 weeks actions of the administration has been also helpful in terms of, reviewing and, trying to, first heal and then, first heal what the immigration system. And then hopefully we'll move to transformation of the immigration system. So that is the good part. I think in terms of what we need to advocate, we would need to advocate with the administration itself first, and not only on the issue of the use of the Title 42 to stop asylum at the southern border. And this is a health order that says, it is a danger for asylum seekers to be let into the U.S. at the southern border, and only at the southern border, because of the health crisis. Lots of health, not lots of, like almost all health experts have said there's no such health issue there. The administration has not suspended this order yet. We hope that they will do so. And because of this order, people are being expelled. You don't have any process. You don't have any due process. And people are being deported despite the moratorium on deportations. And most of the people who are being deported are Black immigrants. There are flights to Haiti going on every day in the last week, some flights to Angola, DRC, etc. So that is something that we need to really focus on with the administration. And then, of course, in order to transform the immigration system, we need to continue and to do a lot more advocacy with Congress. And that is where, we would definitely need all of your help in pushing your Congress people in talking about immigration. So those are the ways that I think we need to work on.
Great. So we have our first newsletter coming out. And I will make sure that I share a link in our Community Weekly news blast so that people can find out more, can sign up for the newsletter, and keep track of the work that Bridges is doing in DC. And just want to ask you if you have any final word or kind of even, express to folks what kind of help is needed at this moment.
Sure. My final word is obviously to thank you all for this opportunity. But what I think is most needed right now is advocacy. And I think Susan has said advocating is so essential. That is true. It is a part of an advocacy for a just and humane immigration system. And I think advocacy as a whole is important, both just for community and for also keeping the democracy going forward. As I said, I have come from a different country, and being able to advocate is a privilege. And I think it is something that citizens can do in this country, and that more and more of us should be doing it so that we can keep our democracy, because it is a vital and essential part of it. That is my ask of you.
So I gave you an even greater opportunity, but friends, what I want to say is that, and speaking of narrow places, this week for us, the narrow place was PayPal. And so we've been trying very desperately to get our donate button working on our newsletter, and Ronnate has been on hold more than then she's actually probably been able to talk to her husband this week. And so, hopefully there will be an opportunity to also financially support this work. In the meantime, if people want to make a donation to my discretionary fund, and just let me know that it's for Bridges, happy to do that. There's a way where Ronnate currently is still working to support, working with other organizations in order to support herself, and we want to be able to sometime in the next year make this a full-time, not that she's not working full-time, but to be able to support this work for her full-time. Because what I was able to see at American Jewish World Service was just how incredibly effective Ronnate has been on Capitol Hill. And so we need somebody who has the skills, the sensitivity, the political savvy that she brings. So I'm so grateful that you came. I'm glad you got to meet my community. I'm glad we got to meet you, and we look forward to learning and hearing more. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm so happy to meet you all.